Imagine losing your little brother in the woods when you were 16.
10 years of guilt, grief, and sleepless nights later, someone knocks on your door at midnight.
You open it, and there he is. Same clothes, same face, same 9-year-old boy you last saw a decade ago.
Everyone calls it a miracle. But I know the truth, that's not my brother. I was 16 the summer my little brother Ethan disappeared. He was 9, small for his age, all blonde hair that refused to stay down and a grin that could get him out of any kind of trouble. He carried his backpack everywhere, stuffed with Pokemon cards, granola bars, and sometimes even batteries or tape because he was convinced he'd need them if something bad happened.
That was Ethan. My little survivalist.
It happened on a camping trip at Pine Hollow Woods. Dad had been fishing at the lake, Mom was back at the cabin starting dinner, and Ethan begged me to walk with him down one of the trails.
I said yes. God, I wish I hadn't. We were only a few minutes in, me swinging a stick like a sword, Ethan humming some cartoon tune behind me. I swear I only turned my head for a second. When I looked back, he was gone.
No footsteps, no rustling, no scream.
Just gone. I ran until my lungs felt like they were going to tear. I shouted his name over and over. Nothing. Dad dropped his rod and joined me. The police came. Helicopters, dogs, volunteers, they searched for weeks. They found nothing. Not a footprint, not a shred of clothing, not even the little blue hoodie he'd insisted on wearing that day. The official story, missing, presumed dead. Some thought a coyote, others thought he fell into the river. I couldn't accept either. I was the one supposed to be watching him. And I lost him. That guilt stuck to me like my own shadow for the next 10 years. Birthdays passed like funerals. Mom cried herself into silence. Dad stopped fishing. I stopped being a kid. And then, 10 years later, he came back. It was a Tuesday night in late October, rain pounding against the windows, when I heard the knock at my door. It wasn't frantic, not hurried, just steady. 3 taps, pause. 3 more. I froze because it was almost midnight and nobody ever came by unannounced, let alone in weather like that. When I opened the door, my heart nearly stopped. Standing there in the porch light was Ethan. Or, something that looked exactly like him. He was still 9 years old. Same blonde hair sticking up every which way, same 2 big red sneakers scuffed at the toes, same freight strap backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked exactly like the day he vanished. Not older, not thinner, not scarred. Just unchanged. For a moment my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. 10 years of guilt and nightmares told me this couldn't be real. But then he smiled, lifted his chin, and said, "Hey, Nick. You left me in the woods." My knees almost gave out. I pulled him inside, babbling questions, my voice a mess. Where had he been? Who had him? How did he get here? Was he safe? Did anyone hurt him? All he said, calm as you like, was, "I was in the woods. I found my way back." Nothing else. He wasn't wet from the rain. His clothes looked freshly washed, not torn or faded after a decade. He smelled like soap, not dirt or mold. Still, I called Mom immediately. She arrived in less than 20 minutes. The second she saw him, she screamed and ran into his arms, crying and kissing his face like she'd been given back the other half of her soul. Dad came later, staring at him like he was looking at a ghost. They didn't ask questions, they didn't want to. They just wanted their boy back. The police came, too. They tried to talk to him, to ask where he'd been, who he'd been with. Ethan just repeated the same thing, "I was in the woods." Doctors examined him and found nothing wrong. No bruises, no malnutrition, no signs of abuse. They said he was a perfectly healthy 9-year-old boy. Mom called it a miracle. Dad said prayers were answered. Neighbors brought casseroles and hugged my parents with tears in their eyes. Everyone celebrated. Everyone but me. Because when Ethan stayed at my house that first night, I woke up to the sound of whispering. His bedroom door was open just a crack. I peeked in and saw him sitting cross-legged on the floor, facing the wall, whispering fast and low. It wasn't English. It wasn't any language I'd ever heard. When I said his name, he stopped, turned his head slowly, and gave me a smile that didn't belong on a child's face. The next morning, I almost convinced myself I'd dreamed it. 10 years of nightmares about Ethan, maybe my brain had finally snapped. But then I noticed something. He avoided mirrors.
Not obviously, not like covering his eyes, but subtle. When he brushed his teeth, he stood at an angle that kept his reflection out of sight. When Mom tried to snap a picture for Facebook, he squirmed. She laughed and told him to smile, and he did, but when she showed him the photo, his whole expression shifted. "Delete it," he said. It wasn't a whine or a plea. It was flat, calm, almost like an order. And Mom obeyed. Just like that. At dinner, Dad tried to tease him about eating so slowly. Ethan didn't argue or pout like a normal kid would. He just looked at Dad. A calm, steady stare, like he was measuring something. And Dad shut up mid-sentence, cleared his throat, and stared down at his plate. My skin crawled watching it happen. That night I couldn't shake the unease. So when Ethan went to take a shower, I peeked into his backpack. I told myself I was being paranoid. But what I found turned my stomach. Inside was a spiral notebook. The first page was filled top to bottom with numbers. Long sequences, repeating again and again, like some kind of code. The second page was worse, a rough sketch of our neighborhood. Houses were marked with little X's. Some had names beside them. Mine was circled over and over, the pencil marks pressed so hard they nearly tore the paper. I slammed it shut and shoved it back before he came out. But later that night, when I was heading down the hall, I heard his voice behind me. "Don't go through my things again, Nick." I froze. He wasn't angry. His tone was calm, measured, like a warning. Mom's voice floated from the living room. "What's going on?" Ethan smiled at me, sweet and innocent, and called back, "Nothing, Mom." In that moment, I knew. Whatever that thing was in my house, it wasn't Ethan. The next day I dug out a box from the back of my closet. It had all of Ethan's old stuff, school photos, birthday cards, little drawings Mom couldn't throw away. I spread them out on the table and compared them to the boy in the next room. And that's when the differences jumped out at me. Ethan had chipped his front tooth once when he crashed his bike. I remembered it vividly, the blood, his crying, the dentist saying it'd always be a little uneven. But this Ethan's teeth were perfect. Ethan's ears used to stick out just a little, enough that kids teased him. This Ethan's ears lay flat against his head. Subtle differences. The kind most people wouldn't notice. But I did. Then I remembered something else. The day he vanished, he'd been wearing his favorite blue hoodie with a stitched dinosaur on the front. We never found it. It became a symbol of the search. Mom kept a photo of him wearing it on every missing poster. But when I checked his backpack now, folded neatly inside was that same hoodie. Only, it looked brand new. No grass stains, no frayed cuffs. Like it had never been worn. That night, after dinner, I tried to play it casual. "Hey, where'd you find your old hoodie?" Thought it was lost forever. He looked up from his plate, smiled faintly, and said, "I told you, Nick. I was in the woods. I pushed. For 10 years? Without growing? Without aging?" His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He tilted his head, studying me like I was an insect under glass. Then his smile widened. "Maybe time works different there." I laughed nervously. "Where's there?" His grin spread too wide for his small face. "You'll see." That night I started keeping my own notebook. Dates, times, things he said, places he went. Because if nobody else was willing to see it, I'd prove it myself. And the first thing I wrote was this: "That is not my brother." I didn't have to wait long before my notebook started filling up. 2 nights later, sometime after 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of the front door creaking. Light footsteps patted across the floor. I slipped out of bed, careful not to make a sound, and peered through the blinds of the living room window. Ethan was standing in the middle of the street. Barefoot. Rain misting down, plastering his blonde hair to his forehead, but he didn't move, didn't shiver. He just stood there with his head tilted back, staring up at the sky like he was listening to something. At first I thought maybe he was sleepwalking. I was about to go outside and grab him when his head lowered slowly, deliberately, and his eyes locked right on mine. That was impossible. The room I stood in was dark, curtains drawn almost completely. He shouldn't have been able to see me. But his gaze pinned me like a spotlight, and then, he smiled. That same too wide, too knowing smile. The next morning, when I checked the floor by the front door, there were muddy footprints. Small, bare ones, leading to his room. But when I looked at his feet, they were spotless. I told Mom and Dad.
I told them he wasn't acting like Ethan, that something was wrong. They looked at me like I was crazy. He's been through trauma, Mom said, her voice sharp, protective. Don't you dare scare him with this nonsense. Dad didn't even answer. He just muttered, let it be, Nick. We've got him back. That's all that matters. They couldn't see it. Or maybe they didn't want to. They'd begged for a miracle for 10 years, and now that something wearing Ethan's face had walked back into their lives, they were ready to accept it, no questions asked. But I knew better. And I was going to find out what that thing really was. I started watching him closer after that night in the street. If my parents wouldn't see it, then I had to. I set alarms on my phone to wake myself every few hours, just to listen. Sometimes I caught the creak of floorboards, sometimes nothing. But on the fourth night, I heard whispering again. It came from his room. I pressed my ear to the door, and it wasn't English. It wasn't even words I could recognize. It sounded like layers of sound, like 2 or 3 voices coming from his throat at once, muttering in a rhythm that didn't match normal speech. I recorded a snippet on my phone, but when I played it back later, it was just static. The next day I searched his backpack again, more carefully this time. The notebook was still there, only he'd added more. Pages of names, neighbors, classmates, even people from church. Some had check marks. Some had dates. Some had one single word written in the margin, taken. I flipped further and found something that made my blood turn to ice. A crude drawing of me, stick figure simple but unmistakable, tall with my messy dark hair. Around it, he'd scribbled circles, darker and darker, until the paper almost ripped. Underneath, in shaky block letters, he'd written, soon. I shoved everything back and barely slept that night. I wanted to storm into his room, scream at him, demand answers. But I knew if I did, my parents would take his side. They were blind with joy, desperate to believe their miracle. If I pushed too hard, they'd turn against me. So I started my own search. I went back through police reports from 10 years ago. Nothing had changed. No new evidence. No new leads. I dug into missing persons databases. That's when I noticed something strange. Since Ethan's return, reports of kids going missing in towns nearby had gone up. 3 in the past 2 weeks alone. The descriptions made my stomach churn. Last seen near wooded areas, disappeared without a trace. That night, I confronted him, not directly, but sideways. We were alone in the kitchen. He was eating cereal, spoon slow and deliberate like he was practicing being human. I leaned against the counter and said, you know, some kids have been going missing lately. Around here. He didn't look up. He stirred his spoon, milk dripping back into the bowl. Then he said, calm as ever, that's what happens. Sometimes they go. Sometimes they don't come back. My mouth went dry. Like you? Finally, he looked up. His eyes met mine, and I swear for a second they didn't look blue anymore. They looked black. Endless. His smile curled. No, Nick. I came back. He pushed the bowl away and slid off the chair, brushing past me as he left the kitchen. And just before he went down the hall, he added in a whisper only I could hear, you should be happy. You'll come back too. After that night in the kitchen, I couldn't shake his words. You'll come back too. It wasn't a threat said in anger, it was a promise, delivered like he already knew how the story would end. I needed proof, something undeniable that I could show to my parents, to the police, hell, to anyone. Something that said, this thing is not my brother. So I dug deeper. I spent hours at the library, scrolling through old microfilms of newspapers. Pine Hollow Woods had a history, though most of it was buried under campfire stories and urban legends. Disappearances stretched back decades. Kids, adults, even hunters. Some were found later, some never were. The eerie part? In almost every case, the family reported strange details like the missing person walked off silently or was last seen smiling before they vanished. One article from the 1970s stopped me cold. A boy named Daniel, age 10, had vanished in the woods. 10 years later, he returned exactly the same as the day he'd left. His parents called it a miracle. They told the papers God had delivered him back. But Daniel didn't live long. He died 3 weeks later in what the papers called a tragic accident. A fall down the stairs. I had to wonder if it was really an accident, or if someone in his family saw the truth too late. When I got home, I went through Ethan's things again. This time, I looked for anything new. In the bottom of his backpack, tucked under the notebook, was a folded photograph. My heart almost stopped when I opened it. It wasn't just of our family, it was a picture of me, taken recently. I was asleep on the couch, head tilted back, mouth open. Someone had taken it from the hallway. My skin prickled. On the back, written in neat block letters, was a date. Tomorrow's date. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in years. I stayed awake, clutching a baseball bat, listening to the creaks of the house. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps outside my door. They stopped. Silence stretched. Then a whisper, too low to be real, but I heard it clear, "Nick." The handle turned slowly, testing the lock. Metal clicked softly in the dark. Then, after a long pause, the footsteps moved away. In the morning, I tried to tell Mom and Dad. I showed them the photo. They wouldn't even look at it. Mom shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "Why are you doing this, Nick? Why are you trying to ruin this?" Dad's face was red, his jaw tight. "Enough," he snapped. "He's our son. He's back. Stop this madness." I realized then that I was alone. They would never believe me. To them, Ethan was a miracle. To me, he was the thing that smiled in the dark, waiting for tomorrow. The date on the back of that photo circled my mind like a vulture. Tomorrow. 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 I couldn't focus on work, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt like a countdown, every glance from Ethan like a reminder that something was coming and I wasn't ready. When the day finally arrived, I felt like I was walking through fog. Mom baked pancakes for breakfast, humming for the first time in years, Ethan sitting at the table with that too-perfect grin. Dad read the paper, sipping coffee, acting like everything was normal. I sat there clutching my fork, heart pounding, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. Not in the morning, not in the afternoon. By evening, I almost convinced myself I'd been wrong. That the photo was some cruel prank, or maybe I was losing my mind. Then night came. I couldn't sit still. I double-checked the locks, closed the curtains, left every light on. My parents thought I was paranoid. Ethan just watched me. His eyes followed me from across the room, calm, patient, like he knew I was playing my part exactly as he wanted. Around midnight, the power went out. The whole house plunged into darkness. Mom gasped, Dad cursed, fumbling for a flashlight. My skin went cold. Not a storm, not a blown fuse, this was planned. I knew it. And then I heard it. Whispering. From Ethan's room. Low and fast, overlapping voices, not human. The same sound I'd recorded that turned to static. Only this time, it wasn't muffled through a door. It filled the house, seeping through the walls. I grabbed my bat and moved down the hall, every hair on my arm standing on end. The closer I got, the louder it became, until it was vibrating in my skull. I kicked the door open. He was standing in the middle of the room. Not sitting, not lying down, standing. His eyes were rolled back white, his mouth moving in ways I didn't think a human mouth could. The air shimmered around him like heat waves, and for a second I swore I saw shapes in it, figures, tall and thin, crowding close. He stopped when he saw me. His eyes slid back into place. That smile spread across his face. And he said, in a voice that wasn't his own, "It's time, Nick." My parents came running at the noise. Mom screamed at me for barging in, Dad yanked the bat out of my hands, demanding what the hell was wrong with me. Ethan just sat on the bed now, swinging his feet like a harmless child, blinking innocently at them. I tried to explain, tried to shout over my own panic, but every word out of my mouth sounded insane. They didn't believe me. They didn't want to. That night I didn't sleep. I sat awake in my locked room, listening to the hum that never really stopped. Somewhere in the walls, under the floor, inside my brother's skin, it was always there. And in the morning, tucked under my door, was another photo. A picture of me sleeping in my bed. On the back, another date. A week from now. The new photo sat on my desk for days, burning into my brain. A picture of me asleep in bed, taken from inside my room though the door had been locked. On the back, in the same block letters, was a date exactly 1 week later. Every second between then and now felt like a blade hanging over my neck. I stopped pretending everything was okay. I bought extra locks for my door.
I shoved a chair under the knob each night, left the bat within arm's reach, and kept my phone recording the room while I slept. The recordings caught nothing, no whispers, no footsteps, but I always woke with the same sick feeling, like something had been in the room with me and left before I opened my eyes. Meanwhile, Ethan was perfect for my parents. Sweet, polite, all smiles. He helped Mom set the table, laughed at Dad's dumb jokes, even started humming old songs we hadn't heard since he disappeared. They ate it up. See? Mom told me one evening. He's fine. He's just adjusting. You're the one making things weird, Nick. But when their backs were turned, his eyes locked on mine. Long stares, unblinking. Silent promises. I started digging again, desperate for answers. I went back through missing person reports, focusing only on Pine Hollow. The pattern was clear now. Every 10 years, a child went missing. Sometimes they came back. When they did, they were always exactly the same age they'd left. And always, within weeks or months, tragedy followed, the family torn apart by accidents, disappearances, or worse. I found an old forum post from years ago, buried in some conspiracy thread. A man wrote about his sister returning after years gone. He said she smiled too wide, never blinked enough, and sometimes whispered to people who weren't there. He ended the post with a warning: if they come back, don't let them stay. They aren't who you lost. There's something wearing their skin. The post had no replies. The user never logged in again. The closer the day crept, the more reckless Ethan became. I caught him staring at our neighbor's house for hours from his window, notebook in hand. I flipped through it again when he wasn't home, more names, more dates. And in the back pages, scratched so hard the pencil nearly tore through, was one word over and over: Nick. 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 2 nights before the date, I woke to the sound of scratching. Not on the walls, but on my locked bedroom door. Slow, deliberate claws dragging across the wood. I sat frozen in bed, bat clutched tight, heart hammering so loud I thought it would give me away. After 5 minutes, it stopped. In the morning, there were marks on the door. Thin, deep grooves etched into the wood. My parents refused to see them. Mom said, "You probably did that yourself in your sleep." Dad muttered, "This obsession has to stop." But I knew. The date was coming. And whatever was pretending to be my brother wasn't just watching anymore. It was getting ready. The night of the date, I didn't bother pretending I could sleep. I sat in my room with every lock fastened, the bat across my lap, my phone camera pointed at the door. My parents had gone to bed early after another argument where they begged me to stop treating Ethan like a monster. They didn't understand they were already living with one. Midnight came, and with it, silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air is holding its breath. Then I heard it, the hum. Not just in my head this time, but vibrating through the floor, the walls, even the glass of water on my nightstand. It was the same sound I'd heard when he whispered, when his eyes rolled back, when the air shimmered around him. Only now it was everywhere. The lights flickered and went out. My phone screen was the only glow left. That's when the scratching began again. Slow, deliberate, across my door. Then the knob rattled. The chair shuddered under the pressure. And then his voice, sweet and calm: "Nick, open the door. It's time." I held the bat so tight my knuckles went white. "You're not my brother," I shouted, my voice shaking. "Stay the hell away from me." There was a pause. Then he laughed. It wasn't a child's laugh. It was layered, echoing, too many voices at once. My blood turned to ice. The knob twisted harder, the wood groaning. The chair slid an inch across the floor. I braced myself, ready to swing, when suddenly everything stopped. The hum, the scratching, the pressure, it all vanished. Silence. Minutes dragged by like hours before I finally unlocked the door. The hallway was empty. My parents' bedroom door was closed. But down the hall, Ethan's door was wide open. I crept inside. His bed was neatly made. His backpack was gone. The notebook, the clothes, everything gone. Like he'd never been there at all. Only one thing remained. On the pillow sat a single Polaroid. A photo of me standing in the doorway, bat raised, eyes wide in terror. Taken seconds earlier, when I thought I was alone. On the back, one word written in thick black marker: soon. The police searched when I told them Ethan had disappeared again, but of course they found nothing.
Mom refused to accept it, she still sets a plate for him at dinner. Dad pretends everything's normal but won't look me in the eye. And me? I moved out. I keep the photo locked in a drawer. I try to tell myself it's over, that whatever wore my brother's face is gone. But some nights, when the house is still and I'm drifting off to sleep, I swear I hear it again. That hum, faint but growing louder, vibrating through the walls. And sometimes, when I wake in the dark, I feel it, that someone has been in the room, watching me. I don't know when the next date will be. But I know one thing for certain, whatever came back from those woods wasn't Ethan. And one day soon, it's coming for me.